Bernie. My objective for today is to change the way that some people think about marginal land. And if we talk about marginal land, that's the actual definition of it. It is little or no potential for profit for commercial agriculture. It often has poor soil or other characteristics, it's very, very exposed, makes it generally unused for farming. It is all around the world, it is the last land to be brought into cultivation, and it's the first land to be abandoned. So you can see it all around West Cork. West Cork is full of marginal land. In fact, it's nearly all marginal. Little abandoned fields, getting overgrown with rushes and gorse. No longer profitable. There might be the odd sheep grazing around in them, but they're generally not considered usable land. And we're talking about the agricultural systems earlier on. The man's agricultural systems to date have resulted in this. I don't know who it was said it, but the best definition of man: forests precede him and deserts follow him. Now, we think in Ireland is a very, very green country. If you consider what has happened to our landscape in the last 5,000 years, the only thing that's stopping us being a desert is the fact that it rains so much. But basically we've stripped away the trees and everything else. Rob Hopkins posed this question, or he phrased it really, really well, which is a question we have to look at about farming. How do we make our farming into something more sustainable? And the way he puts it, creating something more diverse, robust, perennial, based not on tillage, but soil building techniques, and able to get its own nutrients, fix its own nutrients from the air, lock up its own nutrients in the system, so that it doesn't come from petrol. Now, one of the tools we can use to reevaluate the way we look at marginal land is permaculture. Now, I hate these definitions, it's really, really do. But it's an approach to designing human settlements and food systems that models natural systems. Now, all right. Now, another tool which we use is forest gardening. The only thing that builds soil in our climate is forests. Grasslands does not build soil. It is the processes of trees themselves breaking down the rocks, fixing the nutrients, turning the soil back into humus, rotting it down. It's the only process in our landscape that actually builds soil. So when you take away the trees, you take away the processes for building soil. So what forest gardening is to try and turn back to tree-based food. Or shrub or herb-based food, and that by using forest designs, we can create a system of way more abundance in the landscape, where our food can come from it without destroying the landscape. Now, it does mean changing what we eat to a certain extent. I have yet to see a pizza tree. I'd love to see one day. I love pizza, but there's no such thing as a pizza tree. Okay. Looking around West Cork, what do we see with marginal land? What do we mean? We're talking about wet, rushy, poached fields, bogs, lots of slopes with very, very thin soils, where all the topsoil has been washed down into the few little ridges that there are, and leaving the rocks exposed. Every now and then, for the last, since Stone Age man, somebody's come along and burned it every now and then, thinking it's improving it. Every time it gets burnt, a little bit more soil gets burnt away, a little bit more diversity goes. And generally people, when they're farming, would look at it and would say it's absolutely useless. You know, you starve a cow on that field, sort of thing. But what I'm going to try and show you that is actually our marginal land is really, really productive if we just get our head right. So I like to think that the glass is half full. Right, there we go. If we use a permaculture lens to look at the land that's around us, and we actually see what's actually there, then we can see, well, obviously it's got lots of water. We're lucky in Ireland, it's got lots of water. But it doesn't have water when you really need it, which is in the peak of the summertime, or in January, or whenever the drought comes. We always have a drought, and all the water was washed away by then and flooded Cork City and done all the rest of it. So water and water storage is actually a very important thing in the landscape. Microclimate. Lots of this land has got very, very fertile microclimates within it. Maybe sunny rock faces or nice little places to grow. It always has soil. It may be very, very thin. Lots of places the soil may only be 2 inches over rock, which basically will grow very poor grass at the best of times, but the soil is generally there. It's also got lots of rock and clay for making paths or buildings or whatever we want to work with. And it creates a healthy living and working environment. Also, the marginal land has potential for fuel, small-scale energy. You can always be getting chopping down some tree crops if you wanted to. And very importantly, our marginal land is also where the remnants, most of the remnants of our peak flora and fauna are there. It's where the last little bits of bluebells, little bits of oak trees hanging on, where in our case, this is where I live up in the back here. And there are some nice oak trees there, but the only reason they're there is because they were too inaccessible for the previous farmers to get at them with the chainsaw. So those sort of pockets need to be preserved and built on rather than developed. Now, I like ponds. I love making ponds. If anybody who knows me knows it. But the main reason I really like ponds are, as a kid, I grew up in West Cavan, and there was a big pond across the moat, and it was full of newts and tadpoles and stuff like that, and it broke my heart when I was about 15 when the farmer came along with a bulldozer and bulldozed the hill into it and tried to make a field out of it. But in marginal land, what we often find is they're very, very wet areas, and my garden, we'll come on to it later on, if you build a pond in the middle of an area, you actually drain it, believe it or not, because with the material, if your water table is at that level, and you dig out a pond like this, you reduce the water table, and where you put that material up on the sides is now maybe 4, 5, 6 feet above the water table, so it gives you a very, very good growing medium for trees, shrubs, gardens, whatever it is that you want. It's also a wildlife haven, and a pond will alter the microclimate. Now come into the wrong button. Sorry, I did that wrong. Right, if you build a pond big enough, some amazing things happen in the area around it. First thing is it took me a while to learn that you get frost pocket protection. Now what I mean by that is, my garden has a big pond in it, about 1/3 of an acre. And what happens is, in the weather like now, April, the beginning of May, you get these beautiful sunny days and the water temperature rises up. And then what kills every gardener sort of thing is that frost that comes on the 1st of June after you put everything out and you're just coming up and everything gets zapped. If you have a large pond in the area, that pond will, at night, just for a couple of nights of frost, will slowly release its heat, just keep your garden maybe 1 degree above freezing and protect your little plants. So it totally changes what the area you live in. The increased humidity, the evaporation during the summertime helps all the stomata and the leaves to open up and helps the plants to grow better. You also get, if you position your garden correctly, you can double the amount of sunlight that you get in the winter time. Because you get the normal sunlight, which comes down on your garden. You also get the sunlight which comes down, bounces off the water and comes back up and gets your garden. So you're doubling the amount of sunlight, and in this country we need it. When you are positioning the spoil, for the want of a word, from the pond, you can make earth pockets. Now what I mean by an earth pocket is an area of earth about the size of that stack that's over there, 3-4 cubic meters. If you plant a fruit tree into that, you force, this is what I've learned from Paul McCormick, you force that tree into producing more fruit. Because if it's got loads and loads and loads of soil, it just puts out its roots and it grows along and it gets big and it's under no pressure to produce fruit. But if it's restricted in the area that it's in and it's got water, it's going, oh my God, I'm not going to survive here much longer, I better reproduce. So the trees which are growing under pressure are actually the most abundant fruit trees that you will get because they're constantly being forced to grow fruit. Okay.